any moment now. So, hello and welcome. I'm trying out the synchronization or lack thereof between screen. Oh, there we are. It looks like it's synced up. Okay. Okay. So I got a little sound bite there and vision bite. And so what I'm doing, apart from testing out the tech, is also uh, talking about technocracy, as the title may or may not say on YouTube. And I've just recorded a video about technocracy, which you may or may not find useful. If the image and sound is okay when I put it together, then I'll probably post it. And the reason I'm talking about technocracy is because if you look around the planet right now, it's probably fair to say that there are a fair amount of technocratic leaders out there. And what is technocracy? What is a technocratic leader? Well, let me preface what I'm about to say by telling you about a little clip which I will play you on the video that I will hopefully post. I'm not going to stretch the tech today because I think my laptop and graphics card probably aren't quite up to it, but I will post this, and it's a clip of Liz Truss, who you may recall was the Prime Minister of the UK for a little while. And Liz is asked the question, do you think that Jeremy Corbyn or Keir Starmer is more left wing? I think the exact question was, somebody suggested that Keir Starmer was further left than Jeremy Corbyn. And Liz Truss says, no, no, he isn't. Keir Starmer isn't. And that Jeremy Corbyn was actually a populist in many ways. And I'm paraphrasing what she said. And Liz Truss goes on to say that Keir Starmer is a technocrat. He believes in the technocracy. Hence, I thought it might be important to talk a little bit more about it. And if you've heard me talking before, if you watched any of the videos that I've made that have a political slant, then one of the people that I've talked about, perhaps unsurprisingly, is the current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. And what I've suggested is that he appears to not only be quite authoritarian, but that is driven by a technocratic perspective. So then we get back round to the technocrats and technocracy. What is it? It's essentially a system of leadership or government where people are appointed because of their expertise. They have great knowledge in a particular area or perhaps more than one area, and they are there in many ways by merit. And so they make allegedly decisions rationally. They make decisions logically. They make decisions based on science. However, people are people, right? People are people. And most of them that I know of anyway aren't Vulcans. So it's not all logic. There are emotions at play. There are people who want to be in power because they love the sense of power, and they may have expertise, but how well received is that expertise if it is not purely driven by science? In other words, people have agendas, people have interests, they enjoy potentially the attention, the power, the prestige, the position, perhaps the remuneration as well. So there's all sorts of things going on. To have someone who's a pure technocrat, and I'm sure that they are around, is one thing. But to have someone who's a technocrat and that actually is the battering ram by which they, through strength of will, perhaps, and tenacity, get their own way, backed up by their expertise, then they could be called something that I've described in the past as like a clubber in terms of a leader, not someone who's out clubbing all the time, but someone who uses that expertise to metaphorically bash people over the head and say, no, I know best. And if you look at what happened a few years ago, not too long ago, during the lockdowns and before, you would see that there were people who were experts and it was important to get their opinion. But that's not all that was going on. There were people who were, well, at least as well qualified, who were not given the same platforms. So, in any system, in any power structure, there are unfortunately going to be people who are a little bit devious, who are a little bit Machiavellian, who may lack empathy. And that could include the technocrat themselves. And if that's the case, then I would suggest that technocracy, whilst it sounds great, let's have those expertise people in power. Let's have those experts making the decision. Let's have it clean and linear and rational. I don't think it can exist. I think it's very difficult for it to exist. For example, and let's defend the technocrat here, you may have someone who's a technocrat and is in power and they really are trying to do the right thing. They're thinking rationally, they're thinking logically, and they're saying this is the thing to do. But they may well be outmaneuvered because they're not savvy enough. They're not cunning enough, unfortunately. They're not cautious enough. They have blind spots and think, well, I have the science, so everyone will listen. But whether we like it or not, they may be surrounded by rapacious individuals who are keen to influence and get their own way. They may be sidelined. This is a technocrat. The technocrat's message may be diluted or edited so it is not all pure science or pure logic. So I think that's one of the issues, and that is more a systemic problem with the political setups that we have around the world in many cases. Now, I think that we're lucky in Europe, we're lucky in the US, that whilst no doubt that goes on to a degree behind the scenes, they are a little bit more transparent, or a lot more transparent than some countries, a lot more straightforward. But the technocrat, well, no, the pure idea of a pure technocratic setup is beguiling in actual fact, because humans will do things that aren't logical and are based on having their perhaps sometimes selfish needs fulfilled, then things can go awry. As I've described, the technocrat may be sidelined. The other thing that can happen is that someone poses as a technocrat, this paragon of logic and balanced thinking, and they're not. They're using their expertise, as I've said before, to bulldoze the way into power, to grab that power, and to shape things to their will. And the higher up that power structure they get, the more people they will impact. And another issue with the technocrats and the technocracy is that it doesn't necessarily take on board what the wishes and desires and hopes and aspirations of the population actually are, because there may be more than one option. And how do you weight things? How do you weight it when you have different options? What would you put as a weighting factor or factors? How people feel, how happy this would make them, how unhappy this would make them, short term, long term, the capacity for people to be able to sing and dance. You might think, well, that's a bit odd, but if think about it, it could be that we find ourselves in a position with a technocratic leader, quite robotic in many ways, that they say, well, logically, the way to do this is to shut down all the theatre, shut down anything artistic, because people will be able to spend more time at work. Now, kind of stupid example, I agree, but some things that are thought about and proposed, well, they are darned stupid anyway, more stupid than the example I've just given. So, in essence, there has to be an element of populism. There has to be an element of humanity. There has to be a big factor in the middle of morality and ethics. And one could argue, of course, in terms of what is moral and what is ethical, but most people agree most of the time with what is kind of in the center of the bullseye about what we're aiming for when we want a moral and ethical society. And so when we have a situation where a technocratic leader could run amok with other technocrats, then I think potentially we could find ourselves in a society, a culture, a country, or countries that are not really fulfilling the needs, wishes, and desires of the population. And I'm one of these people who thinks that the population isn't that stupid at all. I think there's a lot of smart people out there, and I think that people in power have underestimated and continue to underestimate the population in terms of intellect. Just because they're not waxing lyrical from day to day, they're keeping quiet, they're thinking, they're having conversations with their friends, doesn't mean to say they haven't spotted what's going on. And particularly these days with social media and the internet, more people are more clued up than they ever were before. And yes, that still means we can have people with biased perspectives in echo chambers. But I also believe, because of social media and the internet and the conversations that people can have face to face and also in person, but online, people are getting more balanced. Of course, we all veer towards some kind of bias naturally, or biases. Of course, we do. But I also believe that people are not as prone, funnily enough, as they may have been in the past, to just look at things from one perspective. Now, some people can get sucked in, and that is a problem and a facet of the online world. But I think more people don't get sucked in than those who do. And so I believe that those individuals in power, and you can guess who they might be. I'll talk about one group certainly, and I'll come back to Keir Starmer. Don't quite understand that the people see what is going on, and they're really not happy about it at all. And I think that the nub, the core, the fulcrum, the balance is around, and the power struggle is around what people would like, essentially, as opposed to what they're being told they should like. And sometimes what we're being told that we should like, even though we don't like it, could be the right thing. But that's where a balanced, again, calm, rational stock taking of what is being offered is essential. But where people, their hackles go up is where there are no choices, where this is the way that we're doing it, and you need to shut up because you don't really understand things. And when that happens, then I believe that's a red flag, at least one. So let me give you one example of potential technocrats. Now, they may say that they're not. They may disagree with this entirely, but an example of a group could be the World Economic Forum. You may have guessed I was going to say that. So what we have are people who meet, and they meet relatively regularly, and they discuss things, some of which appear to be public, some things probably aren't. And they're normally very influential, pretty well off, and there is a sense of, you people are getting together to tell us what the future should look like and where we should head, and what should be important to us. And again, they are unelected. And you see, this is one of the criticisms of technocracy also, is that people get put into positions they may not be elected. You can have technocrats who are elected, don't get me wrong, that's absolutely the case, but some people may not be. And the World Economic Forum are not, but people gravitate towards that power. Some people, which then leads me back to Keir Starmer. So, in my opinion, and I've said it before, that Keir Starmer is a technocrat. And as Liz Truss has recently said, he believes in the technocracy. I think she said he believes in lawyers, but it's not just lawyers. And I can't really think of them as scientists anyway, but that's by the by. It is the sense of entitlement that comes with someone who has an expertise in an area. But of course, the enlightened amongst us, and that no doubt includes you, will be saying, but surely they don't have omnipotence in terms of access to all knowledge and expertise on the planet. And of course, they don't. They're not omnipotent, they're not omnipresent, they are not anything like that at all. They're flawed. They have a narrow perspective, particularly so if they are technocrats and that's the area of expertise, then what they're focused on is their area. So who would coordinate that? But anyway, Keir, so technocrat, he's taken his legal expertise and said to himself, in my opinion, so therefore I know what's best for the country. I've made all these judgments over the years about the law and legal rulings and based on studying cases, etc., etc. Therefore, I kind of look at the population and realize that I need to coordinate them in a way that they might not fully understand. They need to be coordinated and led. And with privilege and with titles like a sir and I think some legal ruling so that it protects Keir's pension, I think it is. And so he's named as some legal case, and of course getting feted and dined and associating with the so-called great and the good, that can turn a young girl's head. You know what I mean? That can make you think, "Wow, I've made it now." If that's your thing, I'm with the powerful, I'm with the influential, I'm with these fellow leaders and fellow technocrats, and we can rule the world. We can tell them what to do, and I think that's what we're seeing in the UK. I think that we're seeing someone in Keir who is a technocrat, who is also, in my opinion, authoritarian because he's a technocrat. Just do what I tell you because I'm clever and you just need lead. And you might not know anything about what I'm planning, and we've just ignored all the promises that we said we would keep before we got into power, and we've gone off in a different direction. But that's okay. The flack that Keir and his team came in for probably surprised them, but again, it's silly. You see, you think you're smart, but you didn't work out how people were feeling. You did not read the room. That's a little bit dumb, isn't it? And of course, Keir seems to, unsurprisingly, if you've been listening, what I've been saying so far, veer towards where the power is. It's not really the country. It's not really the people. It's not the population. Because the population is only part of the bigger plan. And that is to hook up with the other people who are in positions of global power and influence and be with that crowd. Because if you're a bit entitled and you're a little bit narcissistic, where are you going to go? You're not going to really spend your time speaking to those people that you think are a little bit beneath you. You just need to be told what to do. You're going to find people who maybe are your equal. That could be a bit of a threat, but where you're really going to want to head, like a moth to a flame, is towards those people who have more perceived power and influence. That's where you want to hang out. And that, I think, is partly what we are seeing. And that, I believe, explains in part Keir and his government. And it explains, I think, in part, why people are feeling so disenfranchised, not listened to, and ignored. And in fact, almost that there is a government that is against them. It can feel like that. Once more, I have to add in that I do not believe that everyone in government, and certainly everyone in Labour who's in Parliament, and of course the members, are like that at all. There are a lot of good people. That's important to continue to say. But we do have someone who quite blatantly, again, in my opinion, is concerned with their power and what they can do with it, and believes in their own expertise and intellect. And that is dangerous because it is blinkered and no one is that smart. Everyone has blind spots, everyone has biases, and everyone makes mistakes. And so if we have someone who doesn't care that much about the country as such, in comparison to where he can stride the world stage with the great and the good, so called, then we have not exactly a recipe for disaster, but it could ultimately be that. But we have a recipe for discontent, to say the least. And that is why I come back to, in my opinion, what's happening right now, what we're witnessing and why we're witnessing it. And so, once more, I say, if you're in the Labour Party, then what are you doing to sort things out, to influence this guy directly, or indeed to do something to get someone else in charge? Because I think we're heading way, way, way in the wrong direction. And to finish off, it it is also, because I don't want to be all doom and gloom, it is also worth bearing in mind that often, perhaps very often, people who we disagree with, who are in power and in positions of influence and authority, do things that we do agree with. Their agenda may be different. They may be chasing the adulation. They may want to be the person who solves this problem. And in solving that problem, it does a lot of good on the planet. And we also would want that problem solved. You may be guessing what I'm talking about. It's a big problem right now, not in the UK, but it is a problem that needs solved. And Keir Starmer looks like he's trying to solve it. Why he wants to solve it, now let me not, again, get into anything ad hominem and suggest that he probably is someone who doesn't want suffering that is happening right now in certain parts of the planet. He would want to stop that. So we have to give him that benefit of doubt. That's very important, in my opinion. Again, in my opinion. And also, because he may be doing it from, in part, a humanitarian perspective, but also in part because he wants the power and he wants the kudos and he wants to be the person or the small group who solves this particular issue, then whilst we might find that a little bit distasteful, that it should be about service, it should be about just doing the right thing because it is moral and ethical, and to heck with anything else and how it looks, even if that isn't the case, I suppose we have to be grateful. And that's what I mean, that things can align. Our wishes and desires can align with leaders who are, in the opinion of many, less than adequate and autocratic and technocratic and dictatorial, but sometimes things can work out for the best. And additionally, what I would say is that it is worth bearing in mind that there are other options around the globe in terms of countries, in terms of leaders who are simply awful. And there are times when we have to say, well, this could be worse. And if we can nudge things by public opinion and by certain people in the Labour Party towards a more populist-centric way of leading, then that would be highly beneficial. And again, my opinion, for many of us. And so it's not necessarily that all is lost, but it is important to keep scrutiny and focus on these people and to recognize that what some of them are doing is, at least in part, totally self-centered, to do with power and prestige. They're not alone. Unfortunately, we have several people out there who are like that. But sometimes we also have to say, well, in terms of who else we may have, it's the best of a bad bunch at this point in time. But that doesn't mean to say we should give up any hope of change or indeed any pressure, so to speak, for people to make those changes on our behalf, legally and ethically, because I still think we need a change of leadership sooner rather than later. But it is almost amusing, isn't it, when you see Keir attempting to curry favour with people? It's amazing how affable and laughing and grinning and friendly he can be when it suits him. And he's not daft, not at all. Anyway, I hope you found that of interest, and I hope the sound and vision, if you were listening along, was somehow in some kind of reasonable level of synchronization. Anyway.